and of course a celebrity chat later on. But first we'll be taking a look at what's making headlines across the Kenyan press. My name is Trix Ingado.
My name is Michael Gitonga. It is the 3rd of July. Welcome to the show. As usual, we're excited to have you on board and are looking forward to a great show. As usual, we start off with looking at what's making headlines on the dailies. We'll also be reviewing the week that was and seeing what have been the highlights this week. But like mentioned by Trix, we'll also be having entertainment and our celebrity chat later on. You're always welcome to participate in the show, and you can do that via social media. Hashtag is KTN Morning Express, or you can tweet us directly. She is at Trix Ingado. I am at Michael G. Gitonga. It'd be great to hear from you. But let's kick off the show looking at what's making headlines on the daily.
Now we're going to have Nerima Wako, who is the director of Siasa Place, joining us. Welcome to the show, Nerima. We expect Mark Bichachi to join us later on. He is a political strategist. Now, Nerima, good morning.
Morning.
I hope you're staying warm on this very cold Friday morning.
I'm thinking I should have worn a jacket. It's a bit cold.
Well, we'll soldier on. Now, let's take a look at the dailies. And the Standard newspaper this morning is carrying over, or rather compressing a bunch of stories and developing them from the week that has been. And this is cruel killings, cry our beloved children. And this is stemming from the various, killings of children that have happened. And we're told there is an uptick in this, in kidnappings in various areas. So it's telling us on page 3 this morning that children's societies most vulnerable are feeling the brunt of surging cruelty from close protectors to wider evil schemes. They are being mowed down. And at the beginning of the restrictions that were put in place because of COVID-19, we had an uptick in domestic violence, and mainly it was being meted out on women in the domestic setting. And right now we're seeing an increased, and I would like to hesitate to say increased, because it could be that we're just reporting more of these incidences. So what do you make of this victimization of the young in our society, Nerima?
Actually, Trixie, I would say that it has increased.
Okay.
FIDA has consistently been known to show statistics, specifically when the economy is in a downturn, domestic violence, gender-based violence does increase. And this is even evident in some of the reports that we have been receiving,
right,
where because people have lost their sources of income, people are not working, women are the ones who are bearing the brunt of it. So we're going to see a lot more violence, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And also these statistics are showing us that for some children, school is their safe space. And it's unfortunate because we don't have safe houses. There's nowhere else that people can run to and go to. And also the psychological impact that this is having on individuals. When we're talking about mental depression, mental illness, there are a lot of things that are occurring. And these murders is where we're seeing the evidence that people are really feeling the brunt of the economy.
Right, and when you look at the COVID-19 and its spread in general, we're having a situation where the cracks in our systems are being exposed. So, for example, here, we're just seeing an exacerbated situation because of systems that were not being handled properly before. So what, in your view, would you say should be done to protect the vulnerable in society?
The systems, the structures, I believe even at the moment, civil society working hard with county governments, trying to see whether there are places that they can create quickly to even have safe spaces that people can go to. Because even when you think about it, traditionally, even how we view marriage or the institution of marriage, for instance, a woman is normally told,
Yeah.
A lot of times, even when they are being abused, they find it even difficult to share that information. Or even when you talk about women being abused at home, neighbors might hear her being battered and things like that, but people have this notion that they're not to interfere with an individual's marriage because that is none of your business. But then what happens when churches have closed down? A lot of times women find refuge in these churches.
Yeah.
They go to church, they probably have a one-on-one with the pastor, pray with some of the women in that church. Now that avenue doesn't exist. A lot of times these cases go to the chiefs. And even now what we're beginning to see is that chiefs are being overwhelmed with these cases, because how are you going to handle a situation where, frankly, the man doesn't have a source of income, he comes home, he feels frustrated, he's seeing this woman and his family, that is his wife, and he's supposed to care for them. She has to bring something home too. So we have instances of women actually going around and begging for food. This is a reality that is happening in instances in areas like Madari, where at least if I can go home with some unga, at least for a few days, I will not be battered. I'm appearing to at least contribute to the household. And this is a daily fear for women. And it's concerning because now when we see these gaps in our systems, this is where a lot of funding is to go to, not just during COVID when we're trying to battle this virus, but after it. So that also shows us that if we can't have places to go to, that is supposed to be a service by government, because everybody has right to life. They should feel that I am protected by my constitution and I have a place to go to. But when we talk about government service safe houses, I think at the moment we can only say one in Makueni County, which is not even that old. Meru County is opening one, and that's it.
Yeah, and speaking of Makueni, Nerima, I'd like to draw your attention to page 2 of the Standard. We're being told about a woman whose hands were cut off has been discharged. This is not the first time from that area where we are seeing a woman having her hands chopped off by a disgruntled lover or husband or partner, life partner, whatever their situation was. And in her case, she had said she wanted to divorce, separate from this man, and therefore these are the measures he took. Given that this is not the first time this is happening, could you speak to the fact that perpetrators seem so bold and emboldened by the fact that perhaps justice is not as severe as it should be to put the fear of God in some of these people?
It's not as severe, but you know, there've also been instances where women have actually gone back to that particular home or forgiven their spouse. And again, it goes back to how are we educating young women and whether they even feel that they're in a space where they can manage on their own. A lot of these households, they do depend on their husbands. And even those who do work or have an income, at the end of the month, they share or give the entire salary or the amount of money they've made to their husband. And this is where I believe patriarchy exists in ways where it's a lot more complicated than we think. It's not just a matter of, no, I don't want to return, or he's going to kill me eventually, because that's what ends up happening. If you can cut your hands off, it can take your life away. And I do agree that when it comes to matters of perpetrators, we still have several still walking free. And that's also for the cases that we've seen recently of teenage pregnancies. A lot of them, it's not same age relationships, it's older men or individuals, and they're actually around these young girls' homes. Some of them could even be relatives. And these are the conversations that we're not having, where laws are strict enough to where people are actually intimidated and fear putting such violence on women. But that, in our country, unfortunately, is still lagging behind with the way women are being treated.
Now, speaking of social justice or the lack thereof, there is something to be said for personal responsibility. The stories that we're seeing right now, COVID or not, it points to a society that has deep misogyny, that's the hatred of women, or some sort of feeling that it's okay to do this to women or the weaker people, even if you rope in children. On page 2, we have yet another story about a mother's tears for her raped daughter. We had a story by Willie Lusige earlier on about how Busia is now just a hotbed of defilement of young girls. Where is it? How come we always look at it from a perspective of what can society do, legal systems? What is the place for personal responsibility? Because the perpetrator, there's a line of thought before they actually commit this nonsense.
I think it's very subtle, because even there was a video going around that a friend of mine shared of a young woman who was walking in Buruburu, and she was saying that some guy on a motorcycle actually spanked her. And she was literally crying and saying she's sick and tired of this behavior and being treated as though she's less than human. So it doesn't start, or it doesn't end at just the violence. I think it starts from when boys are younger, in terms of how do we respect individuals and that level of respect. Because even for women, it's unfortunate that just to walk through town, we wear earphones just so that we're not disturbed by individuals and the catcalling and the harassment. By the time you are a teenager, you've already experienced that, and it's normalized. But we also have to look at the history of the laws that are to protect women. We can talk about sexual harassment in the workspace, where people are even afraid to report sexual harassment, specifically if it's from an individual who is placed in a higher ranking than yourself when it comes to position of power. If it's your supervisor, for instance. So even reporting at work is difficult. It's also difficult to report a rape case, going to a police station. So I know several organizations that are putting or pushing for desks that are specific to these cases or to women. Because a lot of times, even when you're reporting such a case, it's what were you wearing? What were you doing at that time? Why were you there alone? Were you drinking? Were you sober? The questions are all wrong. And we also receive those questions at healthcare facilities, where we've also seen young women who are afraid, even after a rape case, to go to a healthcare facility because of the questions that they will receive from a nurse. And these are some of the things where even legally, the laws, if we do not understand them and why they are placed there, or even how difficult it was for the Sexual Offences Act, or even right now, we can talk about 2/3, the fact that it has failed 3 times, and the fact that it is in the Constitution and it is constantly beat around the bush is unfortunate. So when it comes to understanding how our country, our society treats women, women have felt the negativity of just being born a woman in this country. And it's difficult even to lead and to navigate. But there's one thing that we've recognized. So in my organization, we work a lot online as well. And during the beginning of the curfew, and people were first told to work from home, a lot of the trends on Twitter were centered around women. Every week. Every week, it was a woman trending for
and
something she did wrong, a woman
the
trending.
right reasons.
And
being bullied and put down. Yes, we saw that.
Yes. And so we're actually trying to collect this data, because what does that mean when a gender is pretty much a punching bag, a scapegoat for people to escape from this negativity that
when there's a
experiencing
problem,
in
then
society.
literally, actually, I like that you're bringing that up. They're literally a punching bag, whether virtually on social media, digitally on social media, or in the physical world. When there's a problem and there's a stress, the women seem to be fair game. And joining the conversation is Mark Bichachi, political strategist. We're talking about how society seems to be cannibalizing the weaker sex, or rather just the weaker members of society, even children. And one of the stories we're being told about today, just a follow-up from yesterday's, was cruel killings. Cry our beloved children. That's on the top page of the Standard. Children, society's most vulnerable, are feeling the brunt of surging cruelty, and it seems like the numbers are going up as we continue to bear the brunt of tough economic times. And of course, this is also on the Daily Nation, page 3, we are being asked who killed the children, hid bodies in a car. Pretty unfortunate developments here, but they are quite concerning given that it is now a societal trend. Mark, what's your take on this?
First and foremost, I have to agree with Nerima that there has been systemic and cultural disadvantages to being female in this country. Children also are quite vulnerable. We know even in Nairobi today there are many, many children who are house helps, which basically is equal to child labor. So there's a lot of things in Kenyan society that we take for granted that are aggravated in such circumstances. Let me give you an example. Today, if you ask a woman who is hippie or otherwise endowed, if she walks into the streets of Nairobi today, the likelihood that she will be harassed is nearly 100%. And those are things that we cannot allow to continue. And that's during normal times. So at times where there's financial pressure, there's a lot of people who are sitting at home doing nothing, then that aggression only becomes worse. And that speaks to two things. Number one, it speaks to our preparedness in terms of dealing with mental health in general for Kenyans. Number two, it speaks to our culture as a people. It is not, it is still acceptable in some parts of this city, forget about even the rural areas, to cut call at a woman when she passes or to hire a child laborer. But even worse is the fact that our leadership is not cognizant of the softer issues we need to deal with in our society. We're not cognizant of how gender is treated, we're not cognizant of how children are treated, and we do not consciously as a society try to craft a better place for those who are weaker in society. Take the disabled, for example. How many apartments have lifts and there are more than 6 floors? How many apartments have ramps for wheelchairs? How many buildings in town are wheelchair accessible? So those are some of the things. In Kenya, Kenya has become a society for the strong. If you're strong, like Babu Owino, you can stay out of prison when someone is imprisoned in bed, right? So that really is what we need to change in our society. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And if we don't take care of the weakest in our society, Kenya will remain a weak society.
Absolutely, in general. And let's take a look at another of what seem to be our problems. We're told this morning on page 2 of the Standard that Keb's boss was arrested over graft allegations. This is just 15 months into his tenure at that office. And we remember that his predecessor also faced similar allegations. These ones are being termed as procurement irregularities and payment of bribes in respect of awarding of tenders. That is the managing director, Bernard Njiraini. Now, I'll start with you, Nerima. What do you make of this? This position seems to be quite a honeypot for anyone who comes in. Similar allegations trail them.
It would be a honeypot, specifically because it touches on people's businesses. And historically, we've seen the amount of imports that have come into the country, many of them illegal because they contain items that are actually toxic to individuals. Some people's items stuck at ports, not being allowed to be processed through for absolutely no reason whatsoever. I've seen young men lose their businesses because their containers are trapped. And there's absolutely no way of them getting out because they were going to be a competitive business to somebody else who had already bribed an individual. So those cases do exist, and it has a lot of power. And of course, because of that, it's going to be a honeypot, just like you mentioned. But I do hope that we're moving toward the right direction, because our president did start off his administration talking about fighting corruption. That would be my biggest concern. But unfortunately, a lot of times with these cases, we see that it depends on who the individual is on the seat. There is corruption, but then also, if the person is my person, then we can overlook that corruption. And that's the unfortunate situation of this country, where it's dependent on who's on that particular seat and managing that department.
Mark, what do you make of this one? His predecessor faces similar problems. And remember all the talk last year, we were analyzing fertilizer, sugar, all these substances that, or rather, commodities that were laced with substances that could be harmful to us, making their way into the market mysteriously. Now we have this one facing similar graft charges. What do you make of this?
The saddest thing is when that mark of quality loses its meaning in the supermarket. That is the biggest danger we run as a country, that you go to buy a product and you do not know whether that KEBS sticker actually means you're buying a quality product, be it for consumption or for use in whichever way you want to use it. That's the danger, number one. But number two, and what we must begin to applaud, is the arrest of such individuals. You know, when I see people trying to demonstrate and trying to do an M-Pesa fundraiser for people who've been convicted of crimes, I really wonder which devil cast us and died. Because the truth of the matter is, the fact that these people are being called to account is something that every Kenyan should get behind. And I've had this argument before that it is a one-sided fight. Let me tell you, this is what I think, and this is to all the politicians who keep saying it's one-sided. Half a clean room is better than a fully dirty room. And as the wheels of justice turn, the people who think they're cleaning one side of the room will end up being cleaned themselves. Nothing lasts forever, but we've got to start somewhere. We've got to clean up our country. And personally, I don't care which side of the political divide you belong to. I don't care where Njiraine belongs to. Let him face the law. And we must be very clear that CEOs are the accounting officers and they're in charge of the procurements of those particular entities they're in charge of. So if there's irregularities in those things, CEOs need to know that their heads will be first on the block to be chopped off for them to face the law fully. But we must take it a bit further. If you look at the Waluke case, for example, you must ask the question, why did certain law firms charge more money than the profit that was being made? You cannot do a business deal for 100 million and give 90 million to a lawyer unless that lawyer is doing money laundering for you. There is no business like that. And one of the things that I would like EACC to go further, look at Ahmed Nasir, look at Harvey, look at all these people who are gaining in the name of the law from corrupt activities. If banks were charged for taking money out of their accounts and giving it to people in cash, why is the bank that gave cash to an unknown individual in the Waluke case, why is it that bank being followed up?
When it comes to
we
these
need
lawyers,
to take it all the way.
Where the evidence is of these allegations.
Yes.
Yes. So what would you say to that?
You know, let me tell you something. Lawyers have become very interesting in this country. If you look at their comments, when it is their client being arrested or being detained, their client is innocent. But if you look at when it's not their client, then the person is guilty. Lawyers in this country need to grow a conscience, and they're trying. The LSK previously used to have members of the JSC who still practiced in court. So you can imagine your boss coming before you and you're a magistrate and you're supposed to give a decision. Sure, these things are nuanced and innuendo and it's alleged, but we must follow the law to its logical conclusion so that people have justice. You cannot say that there's an unnamed individual behind a deal. We know which bank it went through. We know which lawyer was representative there. And we at least don't question them. We must take it to that extent so that lawyers know they cannot use the term legal fees and client privilege to hide criminality. Because this is the same way where now they'll begin to take terrorist money and say they're defending their client attorney privilege.
Yeah, ethics. There has to be a line drawn.
Yes.
Now, let's move on to a health story. On page 6 and page 7 of the Standard and Nation, respectively, we are being told that at least 2.7 million Kenyans have been exposed to the coronavirus. These are findings by a Cambridge study that said that this is where we are at as far as exposure goes. And on the Daily Nation, the headline is 2.7 million Kenyans may be exposed to that virus, according to a new study. And they go further to give us the numbers. And in total, let's look at it globally. In Africa, we have 422,033 cases. We have 10,451 deaths and over 200,000 recoveries, while globally we are sitting at 10 million cases, over 500,000 deaths and over 6 million recoveries. At the point where we are at 2.7 million exposure, what comes to mind, Nerima?
It doesn't surprise me, frankly, just because right now, if you are to go outside, even right now, town is looking like it's getting back to normal.
Yes.
And not everybody is necessarily wearing their mask appropriately. And also, our population is generally young. So individuals could be asymptomatic. They could have the virus and they have.
It's actually the article
no
says many of us are probably not getting as sick as you would see on TV with the ICU patients, and a lot of us probably are asymptomatic.
Yeah, and I believe that. And considering that majority of our population is young people, then clearly a lot of them are active, they're out and about, and many of them are in the informal sector. So they're not necessarily working from home. So they do have to interact with individuals and not necessarily with the right equipment. That is for sanitizers, getting masks. A lot of people were forced to. They only wear it when they see a police officer because they're afraid they might be arrested, but also access to water.
Yeah.
That's a struggle that we have in our city alone. So for the entire country, not necessarily everybody has access to water. In fact, that's a luxury. So I would believe that that 2.7 million is correct. This virus, because of the way it spreads so rapidly, they were predicting that half of the population globally would at least be exposed to it. And so it's going to be here for a very long time, and it's going to be something that we will get used to eventually, especially as they work toward creating a vaccine.
And we are told that researchers in Sweden are actually saying for every person tested, 2 were found to have T cells, which identify and destroy the infected cells. So I think this is a bit of good news that is coming out of the spread of COVID-19. As it continues to spread, people seem to be developing some sort of immunity. And the Daily Nation is giving us a breakdown of the antibody prevalence in Kenya, going by region, Nairobi, Mombasa, Kilifi, etc. Mark Bichachi, what do you make of this one?
You know, Nerima has put it quite well that, number one, it's going to be with us for a long time. The number of 2.6 million should actually make people who live, especially in Nairobi and Mombasa, to actually realize that this is not a government problem, this is an individual problem. And for those who think that being young is some form of guarantee that you will not necessarily be affected by this disease, I will have them know that I happen to be one of those people whose friend has died of COVID-19. And this was just last week. This is someone I knew personally.
And
so
I love that you're pointing that out, because there are people who keep asking this question, which I find pretty annoying. Do you know anyone who has COVID-19? Have you heard anyone who has heard of it? You know, it is actually a real thing.
Yes.
So I love that you are someone who knows someone and you're telling people about it.
Yeah, and it's critical that we realize that this thing is coming home. And the problem with a lot of us is we keep imagining it's still a manufactured thing by the Chinese or the Americans, or it's the government that wants World Bank funding. Let me tell you, all those questions will not matter when you have to see your loved one being buried by people in full hazmat suits and trying and basically handing him like he's some form of radioactive material. So the truth is, and this is my appeal to Kenyans, the responsibility of taking care of yourself is going to move from government to you. It's going to move away from national government to county governments. So you better start holding your governor accountable. Where are those 300 beds? Because they are going to matter. Ask yourself, are the hospitals in Nairobi, are they going to accept any more people? The government is not joking when it says it is home treatment for now. Read the stories of people who've had to survive the milder symptoms of COVID-19 from home. It is not a joke. Therefore, when you decide to wear your mask as something to hold up your teeth instead of covering your nose and your mouth, when you decide not to social distance, when you decide to party and do all of those things that you're deciding to do, just know that just because you're below 35 or below 40 does not guarantee that you will be alive. And that personal responsibility and that localized responsibility, and this we have to hold to task our governors, because they've got to work with national government, that localized responsibility has got to happen. If it does not happen, let me tell you, as you keep saying on social media, you will cry premium tears.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we shall be looking at the very top stories that have been making headlines and developing as we go along the week. And let's take